In this episode, we move to the part of incident response that many beginners overlook because the visible crisis may seem to be over once systems are restored and urgent technical actions are complete. That is understandable because after containment, eradication, and recovery, people are often tired, leadership wants stability, and the business wants to move on as quickly as possible. But strong cybersecurity programs do not treat the end of disruption as the end of the work. Post-incident activity is the phase where the organization slows down just enough to understand what really happened, what worked, what failed, what nearly failed, and what must change before the next incident arrives. Organizational learning is the larger goal inside that phase, because a security event should leave behind more than a repaired system and a closed ticket. It should leave behind better judgment, better visibility, better coordination, and a clearer understanding of how the organization can become more resilient the next time pressure rises. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to begin is with the meaning of post-incident activity itself. Post-incident activity is the structured work that happens after the immediate threat has been controlled well enough that the organization can think beyond pure crisis management. That work includes reviewing evidence, rebuilding the timeline, validating the scope, documenting decisions, examining response performance, and turning observations into concrete improvements. The key idea is that recovery restores operations, but post-incident activity restores understanding. Without that second part, the organization may know that it survived the event, but it may not know why the event succeeded, how close it came to becoming worse, or what hidden weaknesses remain in place. For a beginner, that distinction is extremely important because it shows that incident response is not only about stopping harm in the moment. It is also about learning from the event in a disciplined way so the same mistakes do not quietly wait in the environment for the next attacker, the next employee error, or the next system failure to expose them again. One reason this phase matters so much is that incidents create a rare moment of clarity, even when they are painful. During ordinary operations, security weaknesses can remain abstract, easy to delay, or difficult to explain to busy stakeholders who have other business priorities competing for attention. A real incident changes that. It reveals how systems behave under stress, how people respond under pressure, how well communication holds together, and where the organization's assumptions were wrong. That makes post-incident activity one of the best opportunities for honest learning that a security team will ever have. If the organization rushes past that moment and focuses only on getting back to normal, it may lose insights that would have been impossible to gain through theory alone. For brand new learners, this is a powerful lesson because it shows that bad events can still produce useful outcomes when the organization responds thoughtfully. The goal is not to treat incidents as helpful or desirable, but to make sure the pain they cause is not wasted by failing to convert experience into improvement. A major part of this work is rebuilding the incident story in a form that others can understand and trust. During an active incident, decisions are often made with incomplete information, shifting priorities, and intense time pressure. Afterward, the organization has a chance to reconstruct the timeline more carefully and determine what actually happened, when it began, how it progressed, what systems and accounts were involved, what defensive actions were taken, and what the real scope turned out to be. That timeline matters because memory is unreliable after stressful events. People forget details, confuse the order of decisions, and sometimes unintentionally rewrite the story in a way that makes early uncertainty seem smaller than it really was. For a beginner, this is an important professional habit to understand. Clear post-incident documentation does not exist just to create a formal record. It exists so the organization can separate facts from impressions, revisit critical turning points, and build future improvements on something more dependable than tired recollections and partial assumptions. Once the basic facts are better understood, organizations often conduct what is commonly called a lessons learned review. This is not supposed to be a ceremonial meeting where people repeat that everyone worked hard and then return to business as usual. It should be a serious, honest conversation about what the incident revealed. The discussion usually includes the technical sequence of events, the quality of detection, the speed of escalation, the effectiveness of containment, the completeness of eradication, the safety of recovery decisions, and the quality of communication throughout the response. For a beginner, the most important thing to understand is that the review should include more than the security team alone. System owners, operations staff, managers, and any other groups that played meaningful roles in the response often need to contribute because incidents rarely expose only one team's strengths and weaknesses. Strong organizational learning happens when the review looks at the whole response system rather than pretending the event belonged only to the analysts who handled the most visible technical work. A thoughtful review also has to move beyond symptoms and into root cause. That phrase can sound a little abstract at first, but the idea is simple. The organization needs to ask not only what happened, but why it was possible. If an attacker gained access through a stolen password, the deeper question is not merely which password was used. The deeper question is why that password created so much opportunity. Perhaps authentication controls were weak, perhaps account monitoring was poor, perhaps employees were vulnerable to social engineering, or perhaps privilege assignments were too broad for that identity in the first place. The same logic applies to software flaws, misconfigurations, exposed services, and process failures. For beginners, this is one of the most important lessons in post-incident work. If the organization focuses only on the last visible symptom, it may remove the immediate problem while leaving the deeper condition untouched. Root cause analysis helps make sure the response does not end with cosmetic cleanup and false confidence. That deeper look usually shows that incidents are not caused by technology alone. People, processes, and decisions nearly always shape the event in some way. A control may have existed but been inconsistently applied. A process may have been written but not practiced. A warning sign may have been visible but misunderstood. A business team may have taken a shortcut for convenience, or a security team may have accepted a risk without fully understanding how the environment later changed around it. For beginners, this matters because it prevents a simplistic story where every incident is blamed on one bad tool, one careless user, or one missing patch. Real incidents are often the product of several small weaknesses that aligned at the wrong time. Organizational learning becomes much stronger when teams are willing to see those connections. Instead of asking who made the one big mistake, strong programs ask how the broader system allowed the mistake, overlooked the signal, or failed to reduce the impact once the incident began to unfold. Communication is another area that deserves close review after an incident because technical success does not erase communication failure. An organization may eventually contain the threat and still discover that leaders were confused, system owners were informed too late, employees received mixed messages, or business teams did not understand the purpose of disruptive response actions. Those issues matter because unclear communication can increase damage, delay decisions, and create unnecessary friction at the very moment coordination matters most. Post-incident activity gives the organization a chance to examine who knew what, when they knew it, how decisions were escalated, whether the right people were included, and whether updates were delivered in a way that matched the needs of different audiences. For a beginner, this is a strong reminder that cybersecurity is not only technical analysis. It is also operational leadership under stress. A response program improves when it learns how to speak clearly during uncertainty, how to keep people aligned during disruption, and how to avoid the silence or confusion that can make an already difficult event even harder to manage. Measurement also plays an important role in organizational learning because feelings about performance can be misleading. A response may feel fast because everyone worked urgently, yet the actual timeline may show that critical hours were lost before escalation happened. Another response may feel chaotic in the moment, yet later analysis may show that the technical containment occurred quickly and correctly even though communication could have been better. This is why organizations often look at performance measures after an incident, such as how long detection took, how long triage took, how quickly stakeholders were informed, how rapidly containment actions were approved, and how much time passed before systems were safely restored. For beginners, the important point is not memorizing a set of measurements. It is understanding why measurements matter. They help replace guesswork with evidence. They also help security teams explain improvement needs in a way that leadership can understand, because numbers tied to operational impact often make a stronger case for change than general statements about how the incident felt difficult or unusually demanding. Another major outcome of post-incident activity is better detection and visibility. Once the event is understood more clearly, the organization can ask what evidence existed early in the incident, what signals were missed, what logs were unavailable, and what data would have made the response easier or faster. Sometimes the lesson is that the warning signs were present but buried in noise. Sometimes the lesson is that the right logs were never collected or that useful records were too short-lived to support meaningful investigation. Sometimes the lesson is that alerts fired but lacked the context analysts needed to recognize their importance. For a beginner, this is one of the most practical parts of organizational learning because it connects experience directly to future readiness. The goal is not only to close the old incident. The goal is to improve the chances of seeing the next one earlier and understanding it more quickly. Good post-incident work therefore strengthens monitoring, detection logic, data retention, and investigation processes instead of treating them as separate concerns. Policies, procedures, and playbooks should also change when the incident proves they were incomplete, unrealistic, or unclear. A plan that looked perfectly reasonable before a crisis may turn out to be too vague, too slow, too dependent on the wrong people, or too disconnected from the actual environment where the event unfolded. Maybe an escalation path was missing, maybe an approval step created unnecessary delay, or maybe an evidence handling process was not well understood by the teams expected to follow it. Post-incident activity should examine those gaps honestly and update the program accordingly. For beginners, this shows why mature security programs treat documentation as living guidance rather than static paperwork. A response plan that never changes is usually a sign that the organization is not learning very much. Strong programs take real events seriously enough to revise procedures, clarify responsibilities, improve contact information, and make the next response less dependent on luck, improvisation, or the memory of a few experienced individuals. Training is another area where organizational learning should leave a visible mark. Incidents often reveal not just technical gaps, but also knowledge gaps. Perhaps employees did not recognize a phishing attempt. Perhaps an operations team did not know when to preserve evidence before restoring service. Or perhaps managers were unclear about when to escalate suspicious activity instead of waiting for certainty. Those lessons should not remain trapped inside a final report that only a few people read. They should influence awareness efforts, role-specific training, tabletop exercises, and future practice across the organization. For beginners, this is an especially useful point because it demonstrates that learning is not complete when the security team understands the incident. Learning is complete only when the right lessons are transferred to the people whose decisions and habits shape future risk. A strong program therefore uses post-incident findings to teach, not just to document. It turns one painful event into many small improvements in awareness, judgment, and readiness across teams that may one day face the same pattern again. Culture matters greatly in this phase, because organizations learn poorly when people feel that every review is a search for someone to embarrass. That does not mean accountability disappears. It means the review should be honest enough to address poor decisions, weak ownership, and preventable mistakes without turning the process into fear-driven blame. If people believe that reporting problems will damage them more than hiding them, then the organization will lose visibility long before the next incident even starts. For brand new learners, this is a very important part of professional security work. Strong learning cultures create room for candid discussion, careful critique, and meaningful accountability at the same time. They ask what happened, why it happened, and what should change, rather than stopping at who is easiest to blame. When people can speak honestly about confusion, near misses, and process failures, the organization gains more useful knowledge. When people protect themselves by hiding uncertainty, the same weak points often return until a later incident exposes them again in a more damaging way. The final challenge is making sure the lessons survive long enough to matter. Many organizations conduct a strong review, produce a solid report, and then slowly drift back into old habits as daily work takes over and the emotional urgency of the incident fades. Organizational learning becomes real only when improvements are assigned, tracked, funded, reviewed, and woven into the normal operating rhythm of the program. That may mean updating playbooks, changing controls, adjusting access, improving logging, revising training, scheduling exercises, or giving leadership a clearer view of unresolved weaknesses that still need attention. For beginners, this is the difference between learning and remembering. Remembering means people can describe what went wrong for a while. Learning means the organization changes how it works because of what it now knows. Post-incident activity is most valuable when it produces durable improvements that remain visible months later, long after the incident itself is no longer the center of attention. By the end of this topic, the main takeaway should be clear. Post-incident activity and organizational learning are the parts of response that turn a completed incident into a stronger future security posture. They include rebuilding the timeline, reviewing decisions, analyzing root causes, examining communication, measuring performance, improving detection, updating procedures, strengthening training, and creating a culture where honest learning can happen without losing accountability. For a new learner, this topic is essential because it shows that the end of active response is not the end of professional responsibility. An incident only becomes fully useful to the organization when it produces better systems, better habits, better visibility, and better judgment afterward. That is why mature security teams do not rush to forget what happened once operations are restored. They pause, study the event carefully, and make sure the next incident finds a more prepared, more disciplined, and more resilient organization than the one that faced the last one.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.